27 children and counselors. That's how many lives ended in a single summer camp during what became the deadliest recreational facility disaster in American history. Independence Day 2025 became America's darkest holiday nightmare.
Extensive storm flooding killed more than 80 people, with dozens more still missing right now. Also, additional rainfall is expected today. Just this morning, Camp Mystic, that's a girls' sleepaway camp, confirmed it was mourning 27 children and counselors who were lost in the tragedy.
What began as routine 4th of July celebrations evolved into the largest missing persons crisis in Texas history, with search and rescue operations spanning multiple counties and involving federal disaster response teams. Welcome to Earth's Dark Secrets. I'm about to reveal how a perfect storm of meteorological conditions created hydrological forces that moved faster than evacuation protocols could respond, and why this disaster exposed critical vulnerabilities in recreational facility emergency management that authorities had ignored for decades. Thursday, July 4th, 2025, marked the convergence of atmospheric conditions that meteorologists would later classify as a compound precipitation event. Multiple weather systems interacting to create rainfall intensities that exceeded historical parameters. The Texas Hill Country experienced what atmospheric scientists termed hydrological overload. Precipitation rates that surpassed the landscape's absorption capacity by unprecedented margins. Radar data documented rainfall concentrations that transformed the region's normally manageable waterways into torrential systems capable of reshaping entire topographies within hours. The Guadalupe River system, engineered to handle seasonal flooding patterns based on decades of historical data, encountered water volumes that rendered previous engineering calculations obsolete. Rivers that typically maintain depths of 2 to 3 feet suddenly surged beyond 25-foot levels, carrying enough hydraulic force to displace multi-ton boulder formations and completely reorganize established river channels. Emergency weather monitoring systems struggled to provide sufficient warning timelines when meteorological conditions evolved faster than prediction models could process. Camp Mystic had operated along the scenic Guadalupe River since the 1920s, establishing itself as a premier residential facility where generations of Texas families created foundational childhood experiences through horseback riding, arts programs, and water-based recreational activities. Dick Eastland, the 74-year-old facility owner who had dedicated 5 decades to camp operations, was among the confirmed fatalities. His death is not just a personal tragedy, but the end of an institutional legacy that had shaped thousands of young lives across multiple generations. Anna Margaret Bellows, 8 Mary Grace Baker, 8 Blakely McCrory, 8 sisters, Blair Harbor, 13, and Brooke Harbor, 11, Hannah, and Rebecca Lawrence, 8-year-old twins. The list goes on. The facility's infrastructure, designed for traditional river-based recreational activities, became a series of containment zones when flood conditions eliminated escape routes. Tennis courts disappeared beneath layers of displaced sediment and debris. Dormitory buildings that had housed excited children just hours earlier became recovery sites.
I want all of you to know we will do everything humanly possible 24/7, looking at every tree, turning over every rock, whatever it takes, if your child is one of those truly missing and not just out of touch, to find your daughter.
Where emergency teams conducted systematic searches for survivors who would ultimately not be found. Recovery operations documented 27 confirmed deaths at Camp Mystic alone, the single deadliest incident at an American recreational facility in recorded history. This toll exceeded previous summer camp disasters by orders of magnitude, establishing new benchmarks for institutional liability and emergency preparedness requirements. Official reports indicate over 120 confirmed deaths across the affected region, with missing persons numbers reaching 173 individuals, creating the largest search and rescue operation in Texas history. The missing persons crisis presented unique challenges for emergency management coordination. Families across multiple states contacted authorities seeking information about relatives who had been participating in holiday weekend activities throughout the Hill Country recreational corridor. Search operations required collaboration between county emergency services, state disaster response teams, and federal agencies equipped with specialized water recovery capabilities and advanced identification technologies. The HTRTX Hill Country Campground and multiple recreational facilities experienced similar terrible scenarios as the Guadalupe River system exceeded capacity simultaneously across dozens of miles. This pattern showed that the disaster wasn't an isolated incident, but a systemic failure of flood prediction and prevention mechanisms across the entire Central Texas recreational infrastructure. Highway evacuation routes that had provided reliable emergency access for decades became impassable flood channels that trapped vehicles with their occupants still inside. Traditional emergency response protocols became ineffective when standard evacuation procedures required road networks that no longer existed under flood conditions. More than 850 people required emergency evacuation as the disaster created isolation zones. Geographic areas where rising water eliminated all forms of ground-based transportation, requiring helicopter-based extraction operations conducted under dangerous weather conditions. The July 4th floods exposed critical deficiencies in recreational facility risk assessment methodologies that had persisted across decades of regulatory oversight. Traditional floodplain mapping had categorized much of the affected area as minimal risk zones, leading to development patterns that placed thousands of people directly in harm's way without adequate emergency protocols. Engineering investigations revealed that the Guadalupe River had been extensively modified through channelization projects designed to control normal flooding events. However, these modifications actually accelerated water flow during extreme precipitation events, converting flood control infrastructure into flood acceleration systems that increased rather than mitigated disaster potential. Bridge clearances designed according to historical flood level data became hydraulic bottlenecks that backed up floodwater into residential and recreational areas that had never experienced flooding under previous weather conditions. Roads engineered as evacuation routes transformed into death traps when water levels exceeded design specifications by margins that rendered 100-year flood calculations meaningless. Emergency communication networks failed when cellular infrastructure became submerged or lost power connectivity, eliminating coordination capabilities between rescue teams and stranded individuals who required immediate assistance.
Texas EquiSearch is one of the state's most experienced search and rescue teams. They spent another day on the Guadalupe River. Now, the mission, as you've seen, is physical, but it's also deeply emotional. They're using dogs, boats, heavy equipment to get through that thick debris and find the victims still unaccounted for. Now, the Guadalupe River, you can see right here, looks peaceful now, but for miles, the banks tell a very different story. Piles of debris, twisted metal, and ravaged RVs line the shore. Texas EquiSearch founder Tim Miller says his volunteers have never seen anything this bad.
Recovery operations employed ground-penetrating radar and underwater imaging systems to locate victims in areas where traditional search methods proved inadequate. Investigation teams discovered evidence of sediment burial events, locations where flood-carried debris buried potential recovery sites under 15 to 20 feet of displaced earth and rock formations. Search teams identified vanishing zones, specific geographic areas where flood dynamics created hydrological forces powerful enough to completely displace not just human remains, but entire vehicles and structures without recoverable traces. The disaster triggered comprehensive reviews of recreational facility emergency preparedness requirements, with particular focus on facilities that serve vulnerable populations like children and operate in environmentally sensitive areas. Insurance investigations revealed that many affected facilities operated under coverage policies that had never anticipated disaster scenarios of this magnitude. Memorial sites throughout Kerrville became gathering places where people honored victims while confronting the reality that traditional safety assumptions no longer provided adequate protection. Current reports indicate that 173 people remain missing from the disaster. Families continue to live with uncertainty about their loved ones' final moments and lack of closure through traditional burial processes. These ongoing missing persons cases show how flash flood disasters create extended trauma that persists months beyond the initial event. Families cannot complete grieving processes without physical evidence or definitive information about death circumstances. Sadly, there are limitations of current search and recovery capabilities when flood conditions redistribute evidence across vast geographic areas, making positive identification impossible even with advanced forensic techniques and substantial resource allocation. The July 4, 2025 Central Texas floods revealed uncomfortable realities about recreational safety in an era of environmental unpredictability. Camp Mystic, the HTRTX Hill Country Campground, and similar facilities had operated for decades under weather assumptions that catastrophic rainfall events occurred rarely enough to accept minimal risk exposure. The disaster proved that rare meteorological events are becoming regular occurrences that demand complete infrastructure and emergency protocol overhaul. Emergency management systems designed for historical disaster patterns failed completely when confronted with flood conditions that exceeded all previous experience and predictive modeling capabilities. The gap between disaster onset and effective response created a vulnerability window that proved fatal for dozens of victims who might have survived with adequate warning and evacuation procedures. As Texas continues processing its deadliest recreational facility disaster, the fundamental question isn't whether similar catastrophic events will occur again, but whether institutional authorities will implement necessary changes before the next holiday celebration transforms into another mass casualty event that exposes the same systemic vulnerabilities that made July 4th, 2025 a date of national tragedy. Thanks for watching Earth's Dark Secrets, where we expose the hidden realities behind our planet's most devastating disasters. If this investigation revealed something the mainstream media won't tell you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us uncover the stories that authorities don't want told. Hit the bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the disasters that reveal our planet's dark truths.